You've asked us the question and today we are going to answer it. Small SUV or medium SUV? It's one of the questions that's on the top of everybody's list, especially if you're on a tight budget. And today we're using two Mitsubishis, Outlander and Eclipse Cross. They're both plug-in hybrids, but let's get to the nuts and bolts of this question because you can tell by looking at them that they are different. This is a small SUV, this is a medium SUV. What you probably can't tell is that there's only a $1,000 difference in the price. When the Eclipse Cross came out, we said it was one of the best SUVs that Mitsubishi built, period. But now it's an older platform. Outlander is all new. But if you live in the city, in the tight confines, tight parking spots, narrow streets, you're probably thinking a small SUV makes more sense. If you live out in the suburbs, you're a family buyer with teenage kids, they're getting taller, they need more room, you might be thinking the medium SUV, the Outlander, is the smarter one. This is a pretty tough battle. We're going to dig into the details and we're going to answer the question today for you. Small or medium, which one's smarter for you? The Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross plug-in hybrid starts from $47,290 before on-road costs for the entry-grade ES model. The Exceed we're testing here starts from $55,990 before on-road costs. Differences between the entry-grade Outlander and high-grade Eclipse Cross are few, more luxurious heated seats and a sunroof the most visible. However, if you're looking for the sharpest way to get into a Mitsubishi plug-in hybrid, you'd absolutely buy the entry-grade Eclipse Cross ES, which starts more than $8,000 under the most affordable Outlander plug-in hybrid. And at this end of the market, $8,000 is a lot of money. You can get into a Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid from $55,490 before on-road costs for the entry-grade ES we're testing, while the range-topping Exceed Tourer starts from $69,990 before on-road costs. Like Eclipse Cross, all Outlander plug-in hybrids are all-wheel drive. Eclipse Cross is powered by a 2.4-litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder petrol engine which generates 94 kilowatts and 199 newton meters. Two electric motors provide the hybrid aspect of the drivetrain with 60 kilowatts on offer at the front axle and 70 kilowatts at the rear axle. Mitsubishi claims an electric-only range of 55 kilometres, but in the real world you'll get close to 40 kilometres of pure electric driving. Outlander also features a 2.4-litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder petrol engine, but it makes slightly more power and slightly less torque, rated at 98 kilowatts and 195 newton meters. Two electric motors make 85 kilowatts on the front axle and 100 kilowatts on the rear axle. Crucially for this comparison, the larger battery pack in the Outlander delivers a claimed 84 kilometres of pure electric driving, and in real-world testing, we routinely got into the mid-70s. That's more than enough range for the average Aussie commuter to get to and from work without using any fuel. Currently, you'll be waiting 2 to 3 months for an Eclipse Cross plug-in hybrid and up to 8 months for an Outlander plug-in hybrid. Mitsubishi is facing similar delay issues to the likes of Toyota, where both Corolla Cross and RAV4, to use the same size comparison, are currently in hot demand in hybrid form.
You're going to hear me say this a fair bit during this test, but it's not so much a case of the Eclipse Cross not being good, because this is a solid small SUV. Intrinsically, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a case of the Outlander being better. So what this shows is how far forward the game moves in what is realistically quite a short period. If you look back to when we first tested the Eclipse Cross at Drive, we said at the time that we thought it was one of the best SUVs that Mitsubishi made across the range. Now that was because ASX and Outlander and Pajero Sport and even Triton were quite old at the time, whereas the Eclipse Cross was a new platform. Now Outlander's moved the game forward, and as such, the Eclipse Cross is starting to feel old. First of all, what do you get that you don't get in Outlander? Well, you get these leather trimmed seats, they're heated, you get a big sunroof. Lucas has cleverly left the heating on as well. It's 40 degrees today and very humid, and he left the heated seats on. That's the old road testing trick 101. I'll have to remember that. I'll be checking those switches for the rest of the day. So you get seats that you don't get in the Outlander, you get a sunroof that you don't get in the Outlander, but you get an older infotainment system, which means a smaller screen and less functionality. You still get Apple CarPlay. We've tested that. It works quite well. You still get a reasonably integrated driver display, but it's starting to feel a little bit old in terms of the graphics and the display. You get easy-to-use switchgear on the steering wheel. You get less smarts, I guess, in terms of storage. Things like wireless charging aren't facilitated, even in this most expensive variant. And then, of course, you get less room. Now, that is not so much of a deal here in the front of the cabin. I've set myself up for my driving position. Plenty of room, seats adjustable. I've got lots of visibility too. I like the fact that these pillars aren't too thick, so forward visibility is really good, and rear 3/4 pretty good as well. However, when we move into the second row, which we're going to do in a second, that's where the physical size of the Eclipse Cross will start to get a little compromised. Let's take a look at the second row. As we thought, move into the second row and space is a little bit compromised. That's my driving position. I do have plenty of room behind it though, so there is enough space here for adults. It's not uncomfortable. Interestingly though, you get heated seats back here in the outboard position, but you don't get air vents, which I find a little strange. I'd probably prefer air vents back here and delete the heated seats. In any case, that's what you get. You get a regular 12-volt charger back there. The seat bases are a little flat, but the backrests do recline. We've got them basically as far back as they'll go. They do come a little bit more upright if you want. And crucially, the sunroof doesn't eat into headspace so much that it's uncomfortable because you can sit up straight, your head's not touching the roof. The high window line's not too bad. You do notice the sloping roof line back here, so that cuts into window space a little bit, but it's pretty comfortable back here and it's pretty useful. However, when we transition across to the Outlander, you're going to see visibly the difference that it makes when you step up from a small SUV to a medium SUV, especially the way these modern ones are designed with massive cabin space. Now, it's interesting what a generation in car design actually means when you sit behind the wheel. The Outlander, even though this is the base plug-in hybrid grade, feels like it's light years ahead of the Eclipse Cross, and that's purely because it's a newer vehicle. Bigger screen, more integrated infotainment, more interactive driver display, clever array of switchgear. It's more minimalist. There's switchgear where you need it, for the AC controls, for example, but just about everything else has been removed. A little bit more storage. Smartphone storage that's set up for a full-size smartphone. So if I grab my phone out of the door pocket, you've got room there for a smartphone. It fits in there. It's not floating around in that console. I like the position of the cup holders. They're out of the way of this front part of the console. Drive mode dial, nice and simple to understand. And even though this is the base level car in the Outlander plug-in hybrid range, it feels like a much more advanced design. Lastly, the driving position. Comfortable. I always say with Mitsubishis, I'd like to be able to drop myself down into the cabin a little bit more. This is pretty good, could be a little bit better. The dashboard and its relation to the windscreen is really good, so you're sitting a fair way back into the cabin. Visibility is great, forward and rear, as we said. This feels like a much bigger, a much more airy, a much brighter cabin, even though it doesn't have a sunroof, and that is simply by virtue of the fact that this is a bigger SUV with more space inside it. Now, of course, my smartphone is cleverly stowed up there in the smartphone receptacle and I can't reach it. So Lucas, can you pass me yours? Thank you. This is why we have cameramen around. They're very handy. I can show you now this clever smartphone storage here. Check that out. Makes you wonder why all manufacturers don't do it. So you can put your phone straight behind the front seat, and there's also a bigger pocket here. I mean, that phone's swimming in there, but you could probably fit an iPad in there, certainly wallet, charging cables, things like that. So that's really clever. Let's see more of that, shall we? Now, I've got at least, I reckon, another 30 to 30 millimeters of knee room alone behind my own driving position. I can fit my feet under the seat in front of me. Almost flat floor, which is another really clever design, and it's pretty comfortable back here. The headroom is significantly more back here than it was in the Eclipse Cross. Of course, you've got no sunroof here to eat into any of that space, but there is a big difference. Shoulder room, because you're in a broader vehicle, is more across the back seat, which makes a big difference if you've got 3 adults or 3 teenage kids who have started to get a bit taller. Window line's a little bit lower, so the visibility out is more expansive in the second row. You do get air vents back here. We said you don't get them in the Eclipse Cross, you do get heated seats. In this vehicle, air vents and no heated seats. Strangely though, given this is a medium SUV surely targeted at family buyers, there's no charging infrastructure back here. So in the Eclipse Cross, you've got a regular 12-volt socket that you could adapt to take a couple of USB ports, if not more. Here you don't get that, so you'd have to be running an extension lead through into the front of the cabin. But it is otherwise comfortable. There's plenty of room back here. And I know that we've said this before in this video, but if you're a family buyer and you've got taller kids and they're growing, or you've got adults that you transport around, you drive around 4 up, there's absolutely no competition between this two, and it has to be the Outlander.
Eclipse Cross, given its compact exterior dimensions, is already smaller in the crucial boot space shootout. And with the hybrid hardware fitted, there's a further penalty to be paid. It offers 359 litres with the second row in use, and that extends out to 626 litres with the rear seats folded down. Compare that to the Outlander, which steps it up to 485 litres with the second row in use, and a whopping 1,478 litres with those seats folded down. The great benefit of plug-in hybrids is that you get a certain amount of electric range, and then you've got an internal combustion engine that does, well, regular internal combustion things, which is exactly what this one is doing now in the Eclipse Cross, because we've run out of battery power. As we described in the specs breakdown, the Eclipse Cross has less battery ability than the Outlander does, and that's because the Outlander's a newer platform with a bigger battery that's capable of taking the vehicle even further. Once you're driving these vehicles though, they're pretty much fit right into the segments that they come from. Eclipse Cross is a small SUV, it looks like one, it feels like one, and it behaves like one when you're behind the wheel. The only factor that you need to really take into account is that it's obviously heavier than this vehicle would be if it didn't have all of the complexity of the plug-in hybrid system, the battery pack, the electronics, the electric motor, all that kind of thing. So it does feel a little bit heavier than it otherwise might be, but aside from that, it rides well, it's comfortable, it's insulated, it's pretty easy to drive, and I do love when it's in pure EV mode, the way that it creeps around town, doesn't make any noise, the steering feels really light, and you can maneuver in and out of your suburb, your driveway, your garage, without the neighbours even knowing whether you're coming or going, because of course you're doing it in silence. So, in short, Eclipse Cross is impressive, it's exactly what we would expect it to be, and even though it's a little heavier than it would be if it wasn't a plug-in hybrid, it certainly doesn't feel that way from behind the wheel, but I'm expecting now when I jump into the Outlander to get a completely different driving experience, because of course it's a much newer platform. Plug-in hybrids cop a bit of a bad rap, but let me tell you that the benefit that you get, especially in a new platform like this Outlander, is you get a lot of the great things about an electric vehicle, like punchy acceleration, obvious efficiency, quiet operation, and in the case of the Outlander, a genuine mid-60 kilometre range on pure EV mode as well, which is fantastic for the average Aussie. But then you also get the flexibility of an internal combustion engine, so when the battery runs flat, you just keep driving, put petrol in it when you need to, and don't need to change anything else. So I think the fact that you get some of the best elements of both vehicles is really impressive with a plug-in hybrid, and it's going to work for a lot of Australian buyers. Now, if you're wondering whether you're going to get into the Outlander and feel like it's not quite as premium as the Eclipse Cross because this is the entry grade and Eclipse Cross is the most expensive, that doesn't happen. And the reason it doesn't happen is because the Outlander is a much newer vehicle. So you get more impressive infotainment, you get a cabin that's a little bit more refined, and I really think as well, Mitsubishi's worked on the driving refinement of this powertrain to give you a more refined drive once you're in the Outlander than what you got from the older Eclipse Cross. So once again, it's a little bit heavier than it would be if it wasn't a plug-in hybrid, and you do feel that firmer ride on the road, so you do feel some bumps in the cabin. It's not uncomfortable though, and that point needs to be made. And I really do like that initial surge of acceleration that you get when it's in EV mode. We've got about 20 kilometres left before the battery gets flat, and we've been bombing around all morning in 35 degree heat, give or take, with the air conditioning running, so the battery's done a really good job. But I love that initial surge of effortless acceleration that you can only get from an electric drivetrain.
And it does that part of the drive experience particularly well. But everything else about it is exactly like you would expect from a medium SUV. So the flexibility, the general ride comfort, the long distance touring ability, the room inside the cabin, and the relaxed way that it gets down the road really makes it practical for most Australian families. Even after the better part of a week switching between these two vehicles, it's going to sound a little bit like right now that I'm hedging my bets, but I'll get to that in a second. First of all, the most important point after we've done this test. If you're looking at buying a plug-in hybrid, please make sure that you have somewhere to plug it in at home. There's no point buying a plug-in hybrid if you don't have easy access to a power point. You don't need any charging infrastructure, you don't need to spend a lot of money, you don't need anything fancy, but you do need a power point. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to first things first. There's already going to be a waiting list on this new Outlander, especially in plug-in hybrid variants. So, chances are you can get straight into an Eclipse Cross now. So if you're impatient, you're going to buy that one. However, if you're a family buyer, if you've got teenage kids, if you're a grandparent, you drive the kids around, if you're the kind of person who tends to have adults in the second row regularly, it really is a no-brainer. You buy the Outlander. There's so much more room in the second row and more luggage space as well. But then if you flip it back to the Eclipse Cross, if you live in the inner city, tight parking spaces, not much room to move, Eclipse Cross really does put forward a compelling story because it is a little bit physically smaller, it's easier to manoeuvre in tight streets, it's therefore easier to park in tighter parking spots. However, we need to get to a result, and for me, the compelling argument for the Outlander plug-in hybrid is the new technology, the improved battery range. It means you can go further on a charge, and it means you can probably get to work and back without ever using petrol. It's got so much more room inside. Do you need what you get in the higher spec Eclipse Cross that you don't get in the Outlander? I don't think you do, because I think when you buy a vehicle that's got electric technology in it, whether it's a hybrid, plug-in hybrid or full EV, I reckon buying the entry-level one is the smart way to go, because you get the powertrain, you get the battery pack, you don't need necessarily heated seats and all of the extra trimmings. So if it's my money right now, I'm getting on the waiting list and I'm buying an Outlander plug-in hybrid. Don't forget, there's a whole heap of detail in the written review. That's at Drive.com.au. And don't forget to hit like if you've enjoyed the video. Click on subscribe so you stay up to date with all of our latest videos and all of our other content. That's also over at Drive.com.au.